Welcome to Conversations with Erica. I'm your host, Executive Coach Erica Mattison. Kimberly Paulk is the founder of Purple Thread Strategies, a personal branding consultancy focused on increasing women's professional visibility and leadership presence. Drawing on leadership experience in both nonprofit and corporate sectors, she has worked closely with mission-driven organizations and national initiatives focused on partnership development and social impact. Today, she helps women articulate their value, refine their message, and become more visible to the audiences who matter most. I'm especially glad to share this conversation because Kimberly and I have had the chance to know each other over the past few years, and I've had a front row seat to parts of her professional journey. Kimberly, it's great to have you here today. What have you been up to lately?
It's great to see you, Erica. I have been busy since we last spoke. I spend a lot of my time now, since our last conversation, I've really taken a deeper dive into working with women on increasing their professional visibility. So working with them on what they want to put out into the world, what messages, and who they really need to be seen by. And then we stay together and work through that so that they can actually have an action plan. So it's very rewarding. The goal, of course, is to get more women the seats they deserve at tables that matter. That's my big why. So it's been a lot of fun.
That's wonderful. Previously in my career, I served as the executive director of the Caucus of Women Legislators in Massachusetts. So I have a longstanding interest and passion for representation in government. So I appreciate the work that you're doing. Can you share how you came to care about these issues?
Yeah, definitely. Women in government is an area I haven't taken a dive into. So I'd love to learn more about that from you because it's so important. I really migrated toward this as a result of our work together. So one of the things you encouraged me to do in our conversations was to look back at the stories. You called them stories. And as we went through that process, see what stayed with me, what I carried forward from story to story, if there were any themes, and then also how that all landed with me. So one of the things that I observed in that process was that I really find working with women rewarding, and particularly if I can help support or elevate really strong, talented women who may just not be getting the frequency that some men do. So that was my starting point. And then it's kind of like when you buy a red car and then all you see are red cars on the road. I started to be more in tune to some of the statistics that kind of float around us every day. For instance, the gender pay differential really hasn't moved significantly over the last 20 years. The number of women who are CEOs in Fortune 500 companies, 10-ish%, but that's 50 women. There's a lot of stats like that started kind of bubbling up and coming to my attention. And it just made me feel more strongly that if I can be helpful, this is where I wanted to go.
Would you say that that's important to you? Why do you think this matters?
I think it's because I've always taken for granted that the women who come behind me, the generations who come after me, will have the same opportunities that I did. And I started to wonder if that was in fact true. And if I felt that was in fact not true, I felt a responsibility to try to engage in some small way, in whatever way I could take my skills, my experience, my talents to work to try to move that needle for them, the women who come behind me.
I know you've had a really amazing career leading you up to this point where you're in a position of self-employment. Could you share a little bit about some of those experiences and skills that have gotten you to this point that you feel are transferable to what you're doing now?
I think that one of the reflections I was having at that point in time was about, like I said earlier, the women who I supported or worked closely with in several moments in my life. A partner that I had when we founded, or she was the founder and I came in shortly thereafter, for Share Charlotte, which is an amazing organization, which is now morphed and evolved to other states. Throughout COVID, I worked with an extraordinary executive director at Project N95. I just saw these women up close. And then I also served on a board at a local independent school. So all of these moments of either being in leadership, observing women in leadership, and then pulling forward my marketing background to blend that together into a tapestry is what brought me here.
Share a little bit with us about what it's like now to be on your own, to be signing on clients and working in this way after having a lot of experience being an employee previously.
It's really everything that you read that it will be. It's just different when it's happening to you or when you're experiencing it. I've always worked and loved working in very tiny organizations. So the idea of wearing many hats is always been appealing. I've always loved that. So that part, very comfortable with. The part that's newer for me is that you're really on both sides of the equation. You're the operations, you're the make it happen person, but you're also the hunter gatherer. So that part, juggling the time commitment for both of those and figuring out where the most effective place to put your time is, that's probably been the biggest challenge for me.
As a self-employed business owner, this very much resonates. I appreciate what you're sharing. I'd love to hear more about how you've been finding and developing your flow and your rhythm as you've been navigating this new chapter.
One of the things I've done that's been very helpful is join a couple of masterminds or networking groups that are dedicated to women. So I'm in one right now called Startup Women NC. It's a new group. Everybody in there is a solo business owner right now. It's a very supportive group. So I can bring any question, no matter how dumb, to that group. And then I can in turn be helpful to that group. So that's been one way that I've tried to figure out how to direct my own time and energy. And then connecting with other women who are running their own businesses, especially solo businesses, has been very helpful and rewarding. All the way from what do you use for like a CRM tool to what's your comms plan. So that's been really helpful. And in fact, I find that my clients tend to be solo business owners as well, not just women who are employed professionally, but also solo business owners, which has been really interesting as well, because a lot of times your professional identity and when you're running a solo business, those two things meld pretty tightly. So that's been fun.
Could you say more about the value of peer learning and building this community with other entrepreneurs?
When you come from a small organization or even a large organization, you have a built in support group. So the importance of developing that when you're on your own, I find to be critical for camaraderie, for friendship, for referrals. There's just so many reasons that you need. Otherwise, it's a bit lonely out here running your own business. I think it's one of the more fun parts too of running your own business is to encounter primarily other women, in my case, who are running their own solo shop. It's been very rewarding on all those levels.
So don't go it alone is maybe advice that you would give.
Absolutely. I really enjoyed when I was at Share Charlotte having co-founder. That to me was the best possible scenario because then you really do have somebody by your side, find people who you can talk to who are just as supportive of you as you are of them. And it just makes a world of difference.
I do agree with you that it is very important to build community when you're self employed, whether you are thinking of yourself as an entrepreneur, a small business owner, an independent consultant, however you identify, it really is on you to build community, to do outreach, to seek out those organizations, to participate in those events, to set up conversations with people who can relate to what you're going through.
I absolutely agree. And in fact, to your point of finding that right chemistry, it takes a while, right? It takes a few tries. But the good news is there's so many resources out there now. And again, my focus is on women. So I'm speaking from that lens. But in addition to the group I already mentioned, I have a small little group of women who run their own businesses. And that might be a tutoring business or executive coaching. We have a couple of different professions We meet a couple times a quarter to just chat about time management, whatever's on our mind. Actually, one of the topics that we're going to talk about this week is to talk about who do you need to be in front of? Are you in front of that audience? And if not, or if so, are you being as effective as you could be? Not just your message, but how you convey that. So all of those things that we can help each other with. So there's a lot of opportunity there.
What would you say are some of the most common mistakes or areas for growth that you notice in your work and as you're having conversations with others, especially women in leadership roles? What do you wish that more women were aware of that could be getting in their way?
I'm thinking of negotiation is what's on my mind these days. And so I think there's an assumption, if I can use that as my avatar for this, that women don't negotiate. But Vanderbilt Business came out with a study within the last year that shows that women do now negotiate at a roughly comparable rate as men. We don't have the same results, but the perception that as a woman, the perception that women just don't negotiate as often, I think can be damaging. I think it's important that we understand that we do negotiate, that we do put ourselves out there, that we do carry leadership roles successfully, that women CEOs are very successful. I think those narratives are sometimes missed in the larger picture. And I think that added confidence that comes with that realization that we're good at this is the piece that I find missing a lot. And that's something I try to focus on.
It sounds like challenging some of the narratives out there about what women do, what women are good at, what they're successful at is important. The pay gap is a very real thing. I applaud the work that you're doing, and we need systemic changes, and we also need individuals to be realizing their own worth, establishing healthy boundaries, advocating for themselves, creating win-win situations.
Establishing healthy boundaries, that's another area that I've seen women struggle with. It's very hard to establish boundaries when it feels as if everything is your job to do, not just your role at work, your role running your own business, but also perhaps your role in your larger family group. So establishing boundaries is hard. And I struggle with it myself. So I have no magic wand when it comes to that. But that's been something that's been a theme that I've noticed.
When it comes to healthy boundaries, what I've noticed is that it really starts with a recognition. It starts with an awareness that something isn't quite feeling right. They're always serving others to a point where it's not working. And it can have all kinds of repercussions: sleep, health, financial, social, you name it. Can impact one's self-esteem. In the work that I'm doing with my clients, it's around helping them develop that level of awareness that something isn't working here. And then we identify what is not working. Then we can develop strategies for both mindset as well as really concrete changes that can be made that are going to start to have really big ramifications in their life. It might be tiny steps. It might be things that feel like small mindset shifts, but these can make a huge difference in terms of somebody's quality of life.
Remember some of those conversations with you. And I think that part of that work that I've observed is also the realization that, first of all, you're the only one that can do it. You're the only one that can set boundaries for yourself. You're also worth setting boundaries for. So that part has to start from within. You have to understand. And the women I work with, sometimes they haven't ever taken that moment to pause and say, wait a minute, not only am I responsible for setting these boundaries, I deserve these boundaries. So you have to really start way back to kind of get them to the point where they understand how to lay out their communication strategy.
Recognizing one's self worth and acknowledging what one needs, not only to survive, but to thrive, is what comes up for me when you share that.
Absolutely. But I think that it's a fantastic process. And like I said, you and I worked on a variety of things together. And it's if it's beyond my ability as kind of branding strategist to work with someone, I often refer them to a professional coach because the outcome of transformation that can happen is worth it. It's worth the work. It's work, but it's worth the outcome if you get to the other side. And it's really never actually done working on ourselves. But the journey is worth it when you get to the other side and you realize that your choices are more intentional now and matter in a different way. So it's definitely work worth doing.
Looking at oneself and thinking about what kinds of things aren't working out and coming to terms with some expectations that you maybe had, and then making changes is not easy work, but it's worth it if we're going to live up to our potential to lead a full life. Could you take us back in time, share how you were feeling in your life and in your career, and what made you want to be intentional about designing your next chapter?
Well, I had never done that before. I never hit pause button and dedicated any time or resources to what I was going to do. I followed either the next opportunity in front of me, which I was very fortunate that I had them and I had the flexibility that I needed at different points in my life, or I did what I felt I should do, what others needed me to do in that moment. And so I had never actually taken a moment to say, or work with anyone on it, to say, what do I need to do with the next chapter of my life? And so that was the impetus. And I was wrapping up a couple of projects that I was working on. The nonprofit I was working with at the time was wrapping up because they were closing their doors. So it just was that one of those transition moments in life where I wanted to be intentional. I'd never done it before. My husband encouraged me to just take a breath instead of just moving on to the next thing. And so that was the impetus.
So this was new for you to pause, to be intentional, to reach out for support, and it sounds like be more proactive about the next chapter in your career. So it was a chance for you to really say, I'm going to look at where I've come from, where I am, and where I think I want to go, and be strategic and proactive about it.
Exactly. I didn't ever do it in the past because it never occurred to me that I should or potentially that I could. It seemed indulgent, to be honest with you, at a certain point earlier in my life where I really needed to put everybody else's needs ahead of mine, or at least that's how I perceived my role. So it was a completely new process for me, but it was one that I was encouraging. I have a son who's out in the world now, I was encouraging him to do, and I have a niece and I was encouraging her to do. And then I realized, but yes, but I'm not doing it. I've never done it. That was why I ended up working with you to just try to figure out what comes next and knowing that I might not get it right the first time, but just feeling really good about the fact that at least it was intentional.
What kinds of guidance do you have for the younger folks in your life when it comes to their careers and their lives?
So confusing to be a young adult. I think at any point in history, it's probably been confusing. I think that's potentially even more so right now. So I think my message for both of them has been to not put quite so much pressure on themselves. Be intentional, be thoughtful. Don't rush into the next thing. Don't expect perfection. There's no such thing of themselves or others. And of their career, they both have such a long horizon in front of them. This is a time for both of them. My niece is still in school, but for my son as well, this is a time to explore. Explore what you like, build your stories, to use the vernacular that we used when we worked together. Learn what you like, learn what you don't like, make your career mistakes, but make them intentionally. So I think that's hopefully been the consistent advice I've given both of them. At least whether they listen or not, that's always TBD.
It sounds like they are fortunate to have you in their life, and like this is sage guidance. I'm wondering how all of those pieces of advice also apply to somebody like you in the place that you are at in your life.
It all applies. It feels less fluid for me simply because my chapter in life is different than theirs. But the principles still hold. I don't expect perfection from myself. I do have more confidence at this stage in my life. And I think, there's been studies that show that women do gain confidence as we go through our chapters, it's unfortunate we have to get through the chapters to gain the confidence, but that's where I feel like I am. And actually, part of my process with you was helpful. Part of what we did is I reached out to 6 or 7 individuals who I was close to professionally, who could really speak to my strengths, my challenges, just on a very frank and trusted basis. And I got to see myself through them, through their eyes. And they were wonderfully honest, which was very helpful. And it validated some of the things I suspected about myself, but including my strengths. So I think that all the advice that I give to the younger folks in my life applies to me as well. But I have more data to work with, I guess is how I would say it. So I can turn back to my life story and say, I've done these, I've already learned some of these lessons, and now I can better apply them. Not perfectly, not going to get it right out of the gate, but again, with intention.
Could you say a little bit about what you were hoping or thinking you might gain from coaching and then what you did actually gain or learn from the experience?
Clarity. I was hoping for clarity. And to be honest, I wanted you to just give me the answer. I just wanted to enter a program, do the homework, and come out with an answer. I think the way it worked out is I entered the program, I did the homework, and I came out with a direction. Not complete clarity, because that's still up to me and I'm still figuring it out. But I think my expectation of Erica's going to answer this for me was inaccurate and unrealistic. I'm the one that has to answer this for me. And this is my answer, what I'm doing now.
It is interesting how we have this tendency to want to delegate really important life decisions to other people, even strangers, even people who know next to nothing about us, or say to family members who are from different generations, who've had very different lived experiences, different backgrounds, different opportunities. And we say to them sometimes, here, I have this major life decision to make, what I should do for a living, or where I should live, or who I should partner with. And I'm going to give this to you. I wonder, why was that even something that you were thinking that you would want somebody external to you to answer in terms of what you should be doing next in your life?
2 things. First of all, I think that when we do that, if we receive an answer from someone else in our lives, it never quite fits. And then I think resentment comes. It's like you bought a pair of shoes that weren't really the right size. So there's no good outcome that can come from that. But as for why, I think it was just impatience, frustration at being in this swirl of indecision and feeling pulled in a lot of different directions, trying to separate what I want from what I feel I should do. All of that mixed up in a blender, and you just get frustrated and impatient with it. You're like, I'm just going to go ask somebody for the answer. I'm going to hand them my mess. They'll tell me what to do, which of course is not what a coach does. Because I have clarity around that for sure now. And just coaching is an entirely different process and a much healthier, productive process. And the outcome is much more authentic at the end to me and what I want to do and what I feel good about myself doing and my strengths that I see more clearly now. So, yeah, if you had handed me, Kimberly, you should go be a fill in the blank CPA, which would not have fit at all. I think that, I would not do that thing. I would not go be that thing, but I would feel like maybe that was the answer, but it just didn't fit. It just wouldn't be a good outcome.
When it comes from somebody else, it is received differently than when it is self-generated. But when I say self-generated, I don't mean that it needs to be developed in isolation alone, just you and maybe your computer or even an AI platform. It can be generated with support with a helping professional. I'm curious if you would expand upon what coaching is about or
Mm.
how it might help them. Of course, different coaches have different styles, but based on your experience, could you share a little more about the kinds of ways that it might be helpful to folks who are in a similar situation? They find themselves in a transitional moment, not really sure what the direction they want to go in, having some questions and concerns, and really wanting to find some answers.
Sure. And you mentioned AI, which I'm actually a fan of AI. Generally speaking, I use all the LLMs and I think they have a place, but I don't know that they have a very huge place in coaching for a variety of reasons. But as far as what to expect from a coach, in my opinion, they should shop around a little, find a coach that they feel comfortable with, but also because I think I just got lucky with you. You were a referral to me. I think that relationship is important. But also, I think you should expect that a back and forth with the coach. The coach is going to get to know you and guide you, but not provide the answers. Because as you said, even if you do, first of all, that's not what a coach's job is, but also it's not going to land with me. It's not going to be my idea. And I'll always wonder if I would have come up with that myself. The ownership matters. It's very important to the process because it's an evolution, not just a solution that's handed to you.
I appreciate that. Could you say a little bit about what you were thinking and the kinds of conversations you were having with folks that helped you even get to the point of working with a coach and one who hopefully was a good fit for you?
I was talking about my point in life that I was at to a lot of people. And this was a conversation in a shoe store in Boston. I don't live in Boston. So it was a very random moment. And that's where I guess my perception of luck came in. But yes, I was at this point and I was talking to everyone who would talk to me. And I found a person who was very receptive and who connected me with you. But yeah, I was definitely at the point, and those conversations were my way, I think, in retrospect, of kind of reaching out for answers. Coaching hadn't occurred to me. I wasn't actively looking for a coach. It was a result of these conversations that I was just saying, hey, this is who I am. This is where I'm at. And the response that came back was, have you thought about coaching? So I hadn't gone down that path, but without putting those conversations out there, I don't actually know what my next step would have been.
What kinds of fears do you think you needed to grapple with to get you to where you are now? So many people I work with who have an interest in being self employed, whether they fully realize that at the moment or not, but it does offer a lot of things to them that they are seeking in their life. Going into business for yourself can bring up a lot of stuff for people, a lot of insecurities and fears that one needs to contend with. So, could you share a little bit about the fear piece?
I think that, and I see this in myself and I see this in the women who I engage with, interact with in my network, and also who are my clients. There's a fear of failure. And I think any person in business for themselves has this fear, this sense of failing. Whether or not I'm trying to meet a large payroll, I'm trying to meet a certain payroll for myself. And also just the perception that I couldn't make it work. Or, like I said, with my clients, that they just, something was wrong, but they couldn't hack it. They couldn't make it work. And so that's, I think, can be debilitating. And the reason why I would suspect that and some very obvious barriers like financial, et cetera, would prevent people from going into business for themselves. I have to admit, I still feel that myself and I see it with my clients.
Health insurance can be something that prevents a lot of people from living the life that they want to live because they're concerned that either their premiums are going to be too high and or getting care, services, treatment, et cetera, medications, tests, all of it is going to be prohibitively expensive and they just won't be able to afford it. And of course, we do have so many people in this country who are in really dire financial situations because of health related issues, whether it's physical or mental health. And so these are very real concerns, and I in no way want to diminish them. At the same time, I do want to shine a spotlight on it because I've just heard from so many people who have an idea of what they want to do, but they just don't go for it because they are concerned about those potential health related costs. What would you say about concerns like that? And what are some of the ways that people can maybe do what they want, even though those very real concerns exist?
Well, health insurance was in the back of my mind. I'm glad you brought it up. That's a true obstacle, a real barrier. So I can tell you what I've seen. Well, and this is true in my case too. I have a husband who has health insurance. So I'm very fortunate I can leverage that so that I can run my own business. I've seen most frequently beyond that solution is to start your own business while you are still fully employed somewhere where you do have benefits and try to ramp up from there. That's the other option that I've seen work pretty well so that you have consistent, continuous health coverage. Unfortunately, that's a very real obstacle that pretty much everybody faces.
I would add to that that if one needs to have one's own health insurance and they're not in a situation where they have health insurance through, say, a spouse, that budgeting, financial planning is really important because it can be done. You just have to plan for it, you have to budget for it, and recognize that those expenses will exist. And so setting aside not only the funds for those monthly health insurance premiums, but then also the wellness visits, the tests, and whatever other kinds of medical expenses there may be. And then how are you going to take care of yourself so that hopefully you minimize the amount of time you need to spend in hospitals and doctors' offices and so forth. And so I would encourage folks who are interested in potentially working for themselves to really do some more research and talk to some people who have already made this work and learn from them what can be done so that if they want to explore this, they can.
And another thought I had as you were talking, Erica, is that those barriers aside, one of the ways I've found it's helpful to look at, say, first year, 2, 3 of being in business for yourself is first of all, most startups don't reach profitability or break even until year 3 anyway. So when somebody told me that, a mentor of mine, I was, okay, that's helpful to know. Let's take some of the pressure off. But also, another way I look at my work is not just from a revenue perspective, but from a value perspective. So if I feel that I am truly bringing value into the world, if when I work with a woman or a woman who's running a solo business and I feel like she's in a better place because I was able to work with her, that has a real currency for me. And so I kind of have a dual purpose in my work. Obviously, dollars matter, but also the value that I bring to her and her business is equally important to me. And that's helped me over the last year to kind of look at my work and my results a little bit differently with a little more grace because I do feel like I add value. I know that I'm helpful. And so I feel like if we just give ourselves a different metric, not different, but in addition to the standard, the KPIs, et cetera, that we all have to look at, let's also add in whether or not we feel like we're making a difference. And I think that gives us all a little bit more grace.
What this makes me think about is that we can look at the GDP, right? We can look at like just dollars and profit and so forth. Same in a business. You can just look at the bottom line. But there are also more holistic ways of looking at success, of measuring growth and so forth. So you look at something like the triple bottom line, which is known as people, profit, and planet when you're running a business or an organization and not solely focusing on the dollars. recognizing those externalities and how you fit into the bigger ecosystem. You look at things like a happiness metric that some people believe in, and you can do this on a national level, you can do this on the local level. You can also do this in your own personal life and look at what's really important to me. You know, how do I want to be able to structure my time, my days? How am I going to manage my energy? How much time do I want to be around others versus have quiet time for planning and reflecting and writing? How important is creativity to me in my day to day life? Being outdoors. All of these kinds of things are extremely important in terms of our quality of life. Of course, finances are part of life, but also they are not the only part of life. And they are not the only part of life that we need to focus on if we want to live fully, authentically, boldly, and really fulfill our potential to do good in the world.
Yeah, agreed. I think that the um, the element of creativity is critical for all of us. For me, that takes the form of a regular art class that I gave myself permission to do. Something else I had never done before since high school. But it fills my bucket and I'm valuable. I'm worth an art class. And so I do that once a week. It's just a little art class, not grading. I'm grading myself on a curve there as far as the outcome. But again, it's really time spent away from other attentions where I can just focus on this creative act. That's my gift to myself.
I love that. You said earlier that when you are self employed, your personal life and your professional life can often really have a lot of overlap and unclear boundaries. I agree with that. And so it makes it particularly important if one is self employed to carve out time for those endeavors that are not directly related to the business. Although, if you're anything like me, you see metaphors in nature and all kinds of places that relate to the work that you do. And so it's not really like there's a switch that you turn off and you totally stop thinking about your craft, your calling, what have you. But, for me, dance is one of my creative outlets and something that takes me away from the computer, puts me in a really stimulating, fulfilling environment with diverse groups of people, all sharing this love of movement and connection. And for me, that's totally joy producing, has been for my whole life. So, absolutely finding those things, whether it's something that you've always loved and you're coming back to it after a time away, or it's something that you are discovering for the first time. But I agree, that's incredibly important for having a well rounded life and really being able to live in a way that feels doable, that feels sustainable.
Sustainability, definitely. You can only do everything for so long. So that pace, I think that's a critical message for women. But I also think that some of the things you've touched on, like music, dance, and art, I think those are common languages that we all can share. And I value them, live performances, in a way that maybe I didn't take a moment out in earlier chapters to really value what they bring, not just to the world, but also to me personally. So making time for those here and there where you can, everybody has a different path. But I think that can make a bigger difference than people realize. And like you say, sustainability, grab that where you can, schedule it. And I think it makes a bigger difference. I also think it brings more creativity to your work. I think that even if it's just because you're taking a mental break, I have a friend who's very, very disciplined about his approach to meditation. And he finds that 15 minutes, however much time he dedicates to meditation, is daily practice. And it truly helps his ability to create and be creative in his way. He's a numbers person. So his creativity looks very different from mine. But this part of his focus, this part of his practice, rather, that's his creativity. So for me, it looks different. For you, it looks like dance. For me, it looks like, how in the world do I paint with oils? But for all of us, that time away from our craft or coaching, in your case, I think makes us more successful, more creative, and add more value to the people we're trying to help.
Share a little bit, Kimberly, about where you would like things to go next. Are there particular skills or clients or experiences that you would like to bring into your life as you move forward?
I'm pretty excited about some of the things that are coming because they're new to me. So, this period of time in my life is my answer is yes to most things I'm being asked, not everything. I have to put some guardrails around that. But so this is my year of yes, if you will. So I'm excited to kind of explore that. So I'm forming a picture of what I want from those experiences. So I've given myself grace of not having a fully formed picture quite yet. Like I said earlier, I'm really interested in topics around negotiation for women. I've got some very talented women that I'm going to be partnering with and working on in a couple different programs. I would like to amp up the ability I have to add value, to reach more women. So those are kind of the things that come up as you're asking me that question. I'm excited to see what comes from it.
Some of the words that come up for me are collaboration, impact, exploration, discovery, and feedback. Do those any of those resonate with you?
All of them, certainly, all of the above. I think that the discovery part is probably the most exciting, all the others being also very important. But discovering something is the stuff of life, right? That's what you get up in the morning to do. The opportunity to learn something new has always excited me. And to learn something new that I can put to use to help women gain visibility is like, I get to do this every day. So yes, very much so. The act of discovery is a joy.
That's wonderful. Is there anything that we haven't talked about together today as we start to close out the conversation that you would like to give voice to?
I think that probably I would just go back to a theme that I think we touched on earlier, and it's my encouragement to women to just step out, to take the next step, do the next thing that makes you nervous, that makes you scared, that you're not sure you're ready for. You might not be. You won't know until you try. And at the same time, realize that you're worth it. You have value. You cannot be all things to all people, nor should you try. That spreading yourself that thin serves no one. These are lessons I learned later in life that if I had known them earlier, I do reflect back on how much more value I could have added to my family, to the world, to my partnerships. And so the gift that I have now is that I've figured it out and I can change it going forward. To again, the women who are coming behind me, I would really like them to learn my lessons a little earlier. But just give yourself grace and be brave. Walk towards the storm, don't avoid it.
I'm very grateful to know you, and I'm honored to have gotten to be part of your journey as you explored and increased your clarity and your sense of direction. It's really been an honor to get to know you and work with you. And I think the work you're doing is incredibly important. I wish you the best with it. I'm very excited to follow along and see how things continue to unfold for you. And I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation and share a bit about your journey.
Thank you, Erica. It's been a lot of fun.
You've been listening to Conversations with Erica. I'm your host, Erica Mattison. If this episode inspired you to explore career or leadership growth, visit ericamadison.com and let's get started.